Welcome to the Ghost N.E.A.R Show, where we discuss and actively explore paranormal phenomena of all kinds. I am your host, Keith Johnson, the co-founder of New England Anomalies Research. My co-founder, Sandra, is again in the control booth, but we wish her a happy birthday, which is actually her birthday tomorrow, but we'll get a head start. Happy birthday, Sandra. And today I have some very distinguished guests with me, and they are no strangers to paranormal phenomena and investigating paranormal phenomena. They are East Coast Paranormal Research Team, E.C.P.R.T.
Correct.
And this is the founder and co-founder, Frank Soltis and Joe Fontaine. Very glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having us on.
Thanks for having us on the show, Keith.
Give him a round of applause. So, you guys, I've been waiting so long to have you on, actually. This has been a long time coming, but I'm glad we finally have you here. And you've been involved in this for quite some time.
It's definitely been a long time, and I think we've been talking about this for probably a good decade.
Yes, right.
I know. And,
I know, but
you're happy to be here.
Good things are worth waiting for.
Absolutely.
Yes. So tell us about your group and how you got started, what first interested you, and how you two met.
Sure. Well, I think both of us have had experiences from when we were very young, and had always had, an appreciation for paranormal work, but it wasn't until probably around 2003, I believe it was, when Joe and I joined another group that was local, and we were in that group for a few years, and we're more of a, we want to have EVPs and photography, and instead of just being a psychic feeling, and the other group was more based upon like psychics and mediums and that thing, and we're more of a scientific based people. So with that being said, we ended up starting our own group, which is E.C.P.R.T, and we've been doing that ever since.
Excellent, excellent. So what was it like when you first started out? I know a lot of people watch the TV shows and everything and are primed by what goes on the TV show, but then you get into the reality of the situation. And
well, I mean, I think that, as a beginner paranormal investigator, like in the very first stages of it, I think it's, you're getting used to your equipment, you're trying to figure out exactly, how those TV shows do it and how they capture evidence, and, almost you're in this replication stage of like, well, what are the experts doing, or so-called experts doing, and you try to do your best to replicate that. And I think, when we first started out, we did our best to kind of replicate the format of like an old-fashioned TAPS investigation would be, full setup, really looking to debunk things and actually figure out, explanations for it. I mean, at least for myself, when I first started paranormal, I had some experiences, but I mainly set out almost to disprove it, and in trying to disprove it, figured out, okay, there's something more.
And the shows were really a blessing for us in particular, because they gave us kind of a format. Everybody has an interest in different things, but this was the first time we had a format that you could actually watch and go, all right, well, these are the things you should be doing. And I'm sure it wasn't the only things, but at least it was a basic format, and had some very good investigators on the show in the beginning. Over time, the cast changed a lot, but in the very beginning, I think they had a very strong crew, and we have some good basic skills to learn from, and go from there.
Right. Of course, when I started out, there were no TV shows, with the exception of In Search Of. And of course, the episode with Hans Holzer. Wow, we've got to pick his brain on this show, see what he does. But, so, what kind of cases did you first start investigating?
Well, we've had cases that were historical places, a lot of residentials. Believe it or not, we got hit pretty hard in the beginning as we were learning, and really getting our teeth cut in the industry, so to speak. We actually had some cases that were residentials, and they're much more difficult, obviously, than going to a historical place, and you're getting some EVPs, hopefully, and there's no client to go back to, and there's nobody calling you and blowing your phone up, looking for an answer. So it was a steep learning curve, but I'm glad for it, because I think we've become better investigators in the long run for it. And some of the cases we worked on, obviously you were able to debunk it and help a family, and other cases I don't think you'll ever be able to help a family. And Carl had said it best when we were talking about this, and you can't help a family that doesn't want help.
Right.
Everybody says they want help, but ultimately
Yes.
they have to do the help.
Exactly. I couldn't have put that better. That is exactly right. And it can be very frustrating too when a family will not follow advice. They call you in, and you're going on your own time and everything. Sometimes traveling quite a distance. And I know, as your name connotates, you are concentrated in the New England area, but
Yeah, we've actually traveled, quite some distances, and they all don't turn out to be what you expect sometimes. There's cases we've worked when we first got started. We got called to a case in New Jersey where there was a little boy there, and it was a family that needed help, and they thought something bad was in the house, and ended up being like, the parents were trying to scam us for attention.
Oh, yeah.
We're driving up there, and we're probably 40 or 50 minutes out from the house, and the phone rings, and she's like, "Oh, my son just wanted to know who was coming today, and he had these names, and he's going through the names, and he's like, Frank and Joe and Rick and Matt, and he's going through these names, and we're looking at it like, how could he possibly know who was in the group,
Yeah.
So we go online, and ends up being on our website, and we log in to see what the IP addresses were in the last thing.
Right.
And they're literally on the computer, so when we're in the car, we're figuring out that they're already starting to scam us. We haven't even walked through the door.
Right, they've been doing some research on
finding
you.
the information, correct. But so you never know who you're going to deal with.
Right. What was their ultimate goal, though? Was it?
Well, I mean, it was really an attention-seeking thing. It was mainly done by the mother of the boy. I think the father was just kind of like one of those along for the ride type of people, doesn't have a say in it.
Right.
Her thing was almost like a Munchausen by proxy type of thing, where she was, honestly almost causing an abusive thing and making her child believe that there was this Native American spirit messing with them, and in turn, though, also trying to seek the attention from the local churches and local investigators, and so far branching all the way out to people in like us in Rhode Island and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure exactly how many people that they contacted, but that was more along the lines of what happened.
The worst part was at the end of the day, or I shouldn't say the end, but the end for us is we had a couple of cameras set up in the living room, and we were taking a break, and we kept the mother and son with us there because being in New Jersey, we weren't going to go back multiple times. We wanted to see the reactions with the family in the house versus if the family left, was the activity associated with them or the house. So sometimes if we're going a long distance, we have them stay for a portion of it, leave for a portion of it, and see what's triggering the activity. But we're going outside, and she's the last one in there, and she's like, "I'll be right out. I'm just going to get my sneakers." So we walk out the door, and all of a sudden she starts screaming, and she comes out, and she pulls up her shirt, and she has scratches on her back, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it turns out our cameras got her scratching her own back before she came out there, so it pretty much ended the case pretty quick as we reviewed the tape back to see it. But you never know what you're going to get. You just hope you can help somebody along the way.
I think that basically in the beginning of, because we were talking about how the group formulated and everything, well, with Frank and I going out, we were going out to cemeteries, we were contacting local historical societies and going to all these renowned locations, trying to build our investigator skills up and become, able to actually, if there's a ghost there or whatnot, find it, or if there's an alternative reason, disprove it. And because our goal in mind when we first formulated our group was ultimately to help people, and I think that's why we really reached out as far as we did and went all over to help whoever needed it,
and that's still our goal.
That's still our goal.
Been the thing, no matter who's been in and out of the group. I mean, Joe and I have been the constant since day one, obviously, because we had formed the group, and it's always been about helping people. And I think if you're in it for any other reason than that, you shouldn't be in it.
Right. Very true. Well
you
said.
definitely want to try to help.
When you go into a house, say a family has called you in, what telltale signs do you look for first? Of course, there's the interview and everything.
It is. Well, I can tell you this, from where we started from to what we do now is much different. When we first started, I think you were happy just to get a call. So you were there, the second you got the call to try to, put on your cape and help, so to speak.
Right.
Now I think there's a lot more vetting. I mean, I think we take a little bit more time to try to talk to the family multiple times before we go in there. We don't just rush. After we've talked to them, if we deem that these these people are, somewhat credible at this point, then we'll go to a formal meeting at the house with them. So before we even step in there to do an investigation, there's definitely a lot more things that happen prior to the actual investigation, because there's a lot that goes into it. We have a lot of equipment, that we're running out. We're not just going there anymore for quote, the thrill of it. It's not about that anymore.
Right, right.
As I don't have to tell you, I mean, you have much more experience than probably 95% of the people out there. And, sometimes, it can lose its shine, so to speak. You know what I mean? When you first start off, everything's fun, and you're just happy to be there because it's something new and exciting. But, as the years go by and you've dealt with so many people who have different, views of what's paranormal, and, it's almost argumentative sometimes with people when they believe something's happening and
Yes.
it's not.
Right.
And they don't want to hear it.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
that stuff, we spend a little more time researching that, and then we'll do our history on the house before we even have that sit-down meeting to coincide
Yes,
with it.
right.
And then even with the sit-down meeting, we'll explain, more along the lines of like, if we do this investigation, these are the possible outcomes of what could happen, and they need to almost, really agree to the terms and conditions, like, you might experience more, you might experience less. We might come back and tell you that these are all physical explanations for what's going on, and you're going to have to deal with our advice. You can take it or leave it, but we're not going to lie. We're not going to fabricate. These are the things that, we're very, very upfront, more or less,
Right.
with our
Honesty,
cases.
I think our biggest line is, you might not like what we have to say, but we'll tell you the truth.
Right, yeah,
So-
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, I mean, it's like honesty in this field is integral. It's not like we're not physicians and not paid exorbitant amounts to do this, and we're just going in there to try to make a difference, to try to help.
And to bring up one thing that a lot of paranormal investigators are not going to like me saying, but I'm going to say it anyways, is, how much can you really know about the dead? I mean, all we can do is, make judgments based upon past experience. But you have a lot of people in this field that think they have it down. They know more about the dead than, the people who are dead. And
Right, yeah,
it's just not the case. I mean,
Right.
you have to learn every single time you're out there.
Right.
And what you're going to present to a family is your best interpretation of the experiences you've had in similar cases. But as you know, no two cases are alike. I mean, you might have similarities between the cases, but at the end of the day, you really don't know what you're dealing with. Nobody does. How can you?
Right.
All you can do is hope that if there's activity there, that you can help it calm down, or you can help them get an understanding more of how to deal with it. But ultimately, it's really about the client, and,
Right.
and that's something that you've taught us along the years of, going back and forth with this is,
Right.
Ultimately it's, they have to want to help themselves, and that's a very important thing.
Exactly. And there is something I would like to mention. I mean, you look at these gentlemen, you can tell they're into physical fitness and martial arts and discipline. And that, I assume, has helped you quite a bit in
Well,
the way.
I look at it this way: if I get thrown downstairs and die, then I can stay there and at least get a fighting chance at that point. I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
We do a lot of that stuff, and I think a lot of the humility and just self-respect for each other and respect for families that we're going in is a lot of martial arts based. It's all the
Right.
basic core principles of doing arts.
Yeah, just trying to become better people and help others. That's really about it.
And it's about respect. You see a lot of people that go into places
Yeah.
and they're really not respectful.
They don't respect the
Right,
home they're in.
right.
and-
Oh, that's another thing. You have to have respect, and my pet peeve when people come in and start provoking just to get a reaction.
Yeah. And it's the wrong way of doing it, because if it's at a historical site, it's slightly different, and I mean that very slightly, because you should respect a place that has history like that to begin with. But especially when you're in a residential and somebody's living there, you're going to go in there, you're going to stir up stuff even more, and then you're going to go home and go to bed. And this family's sitting
that's
in the
it.
middle of this
That's
hornet's
it.
nest
Right.
that you just
Right.
dug up. So
Yeah.
it's really important that you treat a spirit with respect, because you don't know ultimately what you're dealing with.
That's true. It's an unseen realm, and largely an unknown realm.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the cases that we've kind of shared together, some of them resolved, some of them unresolved, and I don't think the ones that are unresolved probably will never have an ending to them. They're just going to keep rolling on to
Right. It's
some
not a
degree.
down pat formula.
No.
where everything's going to be the same, and you do this, and this is going to be the result.
And that's
can
even
advise.
another point in the process is when you conduct the investigation, you come back and say there's an evidence reveal and whatnot. Then there's another decision point that the family has to make. Okay, are you comfortable with the information we're giving you? Do you want to know more? You know what I mean? Because then the puzzle pieces start. Because we have cases that are repeat cases. We'll go there. We'll get a couple names on an EVP. Maybe we'll get a voice that's male or female. Now we have like a starting point. All right, I can only explain to you that we caught a female voice in your living room. Next time I come back, maybe we get that same female voice, or maybe we get a different thing. Then the story kind of starts to build itself. So I think we'll see sometimes we do cases that the family's like, okay, there's something going on. They're happy with knowing that they're not crazy and that somebody has, supporting you, being there, like saying, yeah, this is validated.
Sure.
But other times families say, I want to know more. I want, another investigation or to dig deeper into the mystery with it. So.
Which brings us to the case we first worked on together, how we first met.
Sure.
If you'd like to speak about that a little.
Yeah, I mean, the case up in Cumberland was very, very challenging.
Yes, to say the least.
That's for sure.
Yes.
It actually started probably about 2 weeks before Christmas. 2008 maybe, 2009?
Was it that
I'm
long
guessing
ago?
it's been a while. So I actually was on lunch at my day job and got a phone call from the gentleman that owns the house, and he had said first words out of his mouth, which to me is a telltale sign that he's probably got something. I got to tell you something, but you're going to think I'm crazy.
Oh, yeah, right.
Once he says that, you pretty much know that you might have something.
Right.
His brother, who was a career military person, was home on leave, and he was he wasn't a young military person. He was in the military for a life term, so to speak. I think it was over 20 years at that point he was in there, so it wasn't a new person. And he was laying in a bed, and at the very edge of the bed, he had laid down to go to sleep. They just got done watching a movie, and something came at the end of the bed and stared at him, and it was a little girl with straggly hair. And he stood up in bed, sat up in bed, I should say.
Right.
And it took 2 steps towards him. He got up and screamed, in his words, like a little girl, and ran down the stairs. And the next day was the phone call to me to try to come over and figure out what was going on. And the family had owned the house for quite some time. It wasn't a new place that they had gotten in.
Right.
It was really interesting that they had mild activity that was playful for years and years as their kids grew up. Kids had moved out of the house by this point when the activity started ramping up in there. So we basically, set up an investigation. We didn't even do a meeting with them. Again, this was an earlier point in what we were doing. So, we heard his story. He sounded like he desperately needed help, so we bypassed the sit-down meeting, and we immediately set up a investigation there. That night, was an incredible night as an investigator. It really was. I mean, it's the first and only case that I would deem, and I think Joe would deem, that could be a demonic place. And we use that very lightly because I won't tell you that any other place that we went, and we've probably gone on well over 1,000 investigations over the time, and we were out every weekend at places. And this is one of the ones that, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I would consider this to be possibly a demonic haunting in here.
Yes.
And, it was nothing like we ever seen before. We had caught a full shadow figure, which the video is on this show. You guys will be able to see it. That actually was on My Ghost Story. The family went up there and did that when it was on TV back then. It's incredible. One of our investigators is 6'2", and we went out and measured the hallway where this thing walked by, and it was clearly at least 4 or 5 inches taller than him. So it was quite a big figure. And one of the coolest things, equipment-wise, is we have Keith Engel. He makes SpectraCam, at least back then. He used to make all the full-spectrum cameras for Ghost Adventures and Taps when Barry started bringing the full spectrum cameras into there. So that's the same guy that made them. So we had their cameras that I had bought from him. And if you're wearing all black, such as you almost are now, and walked in front of the full spectrum camera, each piece of that clothing would come up a different color black because it had been all dyed at a different process, a different time. You know, it obviously starts off probably as white fabric, and it's dyed. So you would really have a different color all the way up. This shadow figure is completely black, the same tone of black, head to toe. It's just an unbelievable catch. It's probably the best catch that we've had of a full-figured man. He comes up the stairway. Nobody's in the house. We're outside. This is actually before the investigation started. Walks by the door. We actually used a UV light in that room for the first time instead of just an IR.
Right.
So you had this like glowing, you know, bluish light that was in there. And you see him walk right by the door, and he stops, and he sticks his head back in the door to look at the light, and then he walks by. So it wasn't just catching a quick glimpse. I mean, it was a good few seconds, which is very, very difficult to catch. And the EVPs that Joe caught that night on his recorder, too, were just simply amazing.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of EVP activity.
Yes.
I think one of the
very active.
The most interesting things is how, you know, because myself and Frank had seen that live on the DVR. You know, we were out in the van watching the DVR. And,
watching it.
We had a group that was in the basement of the house, and you know, we basically quarantine the house. Like nobody's in there but us. You know, and we rotate our groups in. You know, so we're watching them on the monitors, and they're in the basement. And then there you go on the second floor of the house. There's this shadow figure moving around, and we're like, wow, that's incredible because there's nobody else in that house.
Yeah.
When you were on that case, was there any point where you felt you were in physical danger?
It's tough to say. I wouldn't say necessarily physical danger, but you could definitely tell there was a presence. You know, I think that when you're in the paranormal field, you have to have this presence to yourself. Like you're there for the right reason.
Right.
I think like if a figure can actually see you for what you really are inside, you know, you're not putting on a facade.
Right.
And they know they can't touch you. And I think that, at least for myself and Frank, we walk into every investigation like that. So we've never physically been harmed. You know, I can't say the same for other investigators on our team.
Right.
But for ourselves, no.
And I think it has a lot to do with how much your belief is in your religion. And I don't mean how much you go to church, because I don't go to church, but I could tell you I'm a firm believer in God and Jesus. And not to preach religion at this point at all, but I think that Joe and I have enough of a solid belief system that you know that you're protected, and that is the you know, assurance that you're not going to get touched. You know? But in that house, I mean, we've had you know, on one of the cleansings, you know, you guys had finished it. I sat down on the stairway, and you guys went out to the garage to cleanse the garage because he had the doors open and the lights on and stuff. And when I was sitting there, I had something come this close to me and said, "Just get out." I mean, like audibly, not something that I was, you know, recording and listening after. It was literally here. That family was so scared that we were there a week. Never met them before. Joe and Matt, you've met Matt before. They basically handed them the keys to the house, said, "We're leaving. Say it's all yours." And they actually ended up staying over there for the night. How much trust is that, or how much do you just want to get out of there?
They were scared.
And they had some incredible experiences.
I had spent the night, you know, there. Just trying to see what we could collect, because you know, we spent 4 or 5 hours there, and we got all these results, and you know, we're starting to figure out like what's going on. And when I spent the night, it was a different type of experience. It almost felt like, you know, if you owned that home and you were living there and you had to experience it that way. It wasn't you there as an investigator; it was you there living in that. And I think that was the most different, like, turning point of that investigation for me. Because when it got late at night and you wanted to close your eyes, you know, because you were tired and just physically exhausted from investigating the entire day, you know, you're hitting 4 or 5 a.m. and you're wanting to, you know, the walls are yelling at you basically in there. And it wasn't, that place was no joke.
And one of the most fantastic things as an investigator, I think we had both shared, including Sandra, she was there that night too, is when we were sitting at the kitchen table talking with them, and in the other room you could clearly hear multiple voices like talking at a volume that it sounded like the TV was on in there. It was so loud you couldn't understand what they were saying.
It's like
but
the place was alive.
Exactly, and that's only happened at a few places that we've ever been, probably maybe 2 that I could recall, and that's quite a phenomenon.
So that was quite an interesting way to meet you guys.
Yeah, it definitely was. I think I was blowing up your phone at one point a little bit.
Yes.
Because, you know, they're calling for answers, and there's just nothing I could tell them at that point.
Yes.
You know, but, you know, with your guidance through the case, I'm glad we had, you know, you as a mentor at that point to kind of walk us through there, because it's very difficult to know what to do, you know, when that family's in danger, you know.
I'm very glad you called us in,
Oh, you can,
because I think that's what everyone should do, especially when they're first starting out, is, you know, seek out somebody who has some experience, and because that's the best way.
Oh, absolutely.
Personal experience and people who have been on certain cases like that.
yeah, we were blessed that you and Sandra had come out and you know, shared the time in the house, and like I said, gave us guidance in it.
Yeah. Well, I feel I'm blessed to know you guys.
That's great.
Thank you.
It's wonderful working with you.
Same here.
And so any other cases you would like to talk about that really, really impressed you? I know we could be here another hour talking about all our experiences, but
Absolutely.
I know there's the Huguenot House you've been to.
Huguenot House, yeah, that was great. I mean, we go there at least twice a year, every year.
Yeah, it's basically it's in East Hartford, Connecticut, and there's basically 3 historical places on this piece of land, and they weren't there originally. They were moved there
Yes.
by the Historical Society to keep them preserved and to keep them going. And it looks very similar to the Moses Brown House.
Yes, it's Slater,
very,
Slater
very
Mill,
similar. In
yes,
fact, we were
right.
debating.
Which you've investigated a few times
Yeah,
yourself there.
which was a great place.
And you've actually captured some really good evidence at Slater Mill as
yeah, we
well.
had some good stuff. But it gave us our best piece of residual evidence that we ever had, and we actually have the video for that for you to share. And basically, it started off with a claim back in 1977, I think it was, when they were first doing some work on this property when they moved the house over there. And back then, the security systems was basically an open-ear phone that they would record all night long. If you know, if any sound had started,
Right.
It would immediately go into a recording. And basically, they had hired a contractor as they were putting the house there to do some work. 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, the security company calls the Historical Society and tells them somebody's working in the house. So they fly down there. Nobody's there, and they're arguing with the security company because they're hearing hammering and work in the house.
Housework, yeah.
And no evidence of it.
Yeah, nobody was
It's
there.
just
We
the
actually
sound
caught
itself.
that
Yeah.
residual piece. It's about 3 minutes worth
Yes.
of residual, people working in the house. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, even when we used to do, I say used to do, when we do residential, a lot of times we try to differentiate between, is this an intelligent haunting, is it a
Right.
residual haunting, what
Yeah.
are we dealing with?
Right.
When that piece came up, the learning point that we got from that was just how incredible a residual piece one can
yeah.
be, but two, the information it can give you.
Exactly, exactly.
With this residual piece, you'll hear the man start on the second floor.
Yeah.
And it begins, the audio begins on the second
Right.
floor with the door unlatching.
Yeah.
For that type of thing there, that's incredible in its own. 'Cause
Exactly, yeah.
It's already upstairs.
Right.
Nobody's
I know.
gone up.
Believe it or not, we're out of time, and we've got to have you guys back again. Ladies and gentlemen, East Coast Paranormal Research Team, Frank and Joe, hope to work with you again soon. Hope to have you on our show again soon.
Thanks
It's
for having
been a
us
long
on.
time
Appreciate
coming. Anybody would like to meet Frank and Joe in person? Here they are. Get their autographs, whatever, But thank you guys for coming on.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you for
so
having
much, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we enjoyed ourselves. Thank you.
Good luck. You've got some great information.